Well, we're in the fourth week of our series, You're Invited. And I'm going to start this morning off with a couple of stories about myself. And so as a kid, I never really received many invitations from my fellow friends, or what I would call friends, to do many things. And now what I'm talking about is invitations from these kids to go and do something, or birthday parties, or whatever. And really, I only ever had probably one person that you and I would call a friend, one person where we'd actually go to each other's house, sometimes spend the night. I only had one person that was like that. And being an introvert like I am and living out in the country kind of secluded from everybody, it just kind of led to that situation. There wasn't many opportunities for that to happen. But there are two times when I was invited. And these two times really stand out to me. The first was once in middle school, and the second time was when I was in high school. And both of these invitations were invitations from my peers to go out and do something with them. And it's kind of like the invitations we've been talking about, like the ones you receive in the mail. But these ones were not sent in the mail. These were made personal. They were made face-to-face, more or less. They were made from one person directly to me. So that first invitation that I got was to a birthday party. Now, it wasn't necessarily anything super exciting. We didn't go to Great Wolf Lodge. We didn't go to mini golf. We didn't go out and do all these fun things at Chuck E. Cheese. We just got together at this guy's house. We played some two-hand touch football. We played some video games. Of course, we did some dumb things, not like dumb like bad, but just dumb like immature middle school boy things, But that's not really what made this invitation special. It wasn't necessarily what we did at this birthday party that made it special. It was something else. Now remember, I said I only had really one friend that was part of my what I would call friend group, and so I didn't have many close friends for sure. And as I think about the person's whose birthday's party it was, and all the other people were there, my one friend that I had wasn't there. So I really didn't have much of a relationship at all with any of these people. And so I wouldn't call them friends like we would normally do. They were just fellow students with whom I'd had cordial relationships at school. And so it was really a complete surprise. Honestly, I think back even from today, I think, what went through their mind? Why did they invite me? I wasn't a part of that group. I didn't hang out with them. We didn't do things. What possessed them to invite me to their birthday party? But someone, for whatever reason, decided to invite me. They found me important enough to send out that invitation. So that's the first invitation in middle school. The second invitation when I was in high school, and it's very similar. Again, I wouldn't have what I would call a large group of friends, but by this point I had a group of people that I hung out with in the hallways and at the lunch table. So I'd spent a lot of time with them. So we could call them friends by association, not necessarily like somebody that I was super close with. And it never extended beyond that. There was never anything outside of school that I did with this group of people. So one day I was sitting at home, and I was sitting there, and the phone call comes in on our landline phone. Lane and Caitlin, landline it's not cell phone. My friends had cell phones, I didn't, and so they had to call me. They had to find my number, so they looked it up in a phone book. That's a book that has everybody's phone number in it. And they looked it up, or they got it from, I don't know how we got my parents' phone number, but the phone rings, my parents answer it, and they say, "It's for you." And so I get online, and it's one of the guys that I hang out with. He's asking for me, and he says, "Hey, we're going to go up to the movies today, and we thought we might invite you to come along." And, well, of course, I actually had something going on that day, so I didn't just say no, but I couldn't go because I had things going on. But this invitation came completely out of the blue. I was not expecting it whatsoever. And so, and it was really weird, especially because, like I said, I had never had any out-of-school contacts with them, out of the hallways or out of the lunchroom, and now they're inviting me to go out to the movies, which has nothing to do with school. But what made that invitation important and significant was that they thought to invite me. Now, I told you all a few months into having brought me on at this church that I'm an introvert, and most of you gave me this look like, you have to be kidding, right? I think this probably goes to prove how much my introversion actually is, or at least was to a point. But what I wanted to point out with these two invitations is a couple of things. The first thing that I wanted to point out is that, and this is obviously related to what we talked about last week. Last week we talked about invitations that we send out. Invitations where we invite people into our lives. And when we invite people into our lives, it changes us. It changes us because we're inviting them into the most personal parts of our life. Now, it changes us for the good and for the not so good. You know, you might have had friendships, or you look at people who you ran with when you were younger, or maybe now possibly, I don't know who you run with, but you remember being with them, you remember a series of bad decisions with lasting consequences, and you even look back and it changed who you were. It changed how you thought, it changed how you viewed life, it changed your politics, it changed your attitude. Maybe you look back on that time and you think, I didn't even recognize that person. Talking about yourself. You're like, man, that changed me. But we also had the opposite experience where when we invited somebody in, it changed our life for the better. You invited somebody in and you began this relationship and you had no idea what was going to happen. You had no idea the bond that was going to be formed. But now, as you look back over your life and you look back and you see all the most integral moments of your life and your faith especially, they're always tied, or almost always tied, to that person that you invited in. You look back now and you say, I'm not sure my life would be what it is right now without that person. Because when we invite people into our lives, it changes us. They change us. And we talked about this last week. It's because we're created for community, created by God to be with one another, to have influence over one another, to work on each other. And so that's the first thing I wanted to point out about invitations. The second thing is kind of really our focus for today. And I primed the pump last week when I said this. I said, we might probably need to be inviting more people into our lives because we have something worth sharing. We probably need to be inviting more people into our lives because we have something to share, created by God to have a positive influence on the people around us. But we can't do that unless we invite them in. So that leads us to today's invitation. The most important invitation that we're talking about in this series. If there's a first above this, it's only the invitation of Jesus into your life. But for where we are right now, I would say this is the most important invitation that we're going to talk about because it's about the times that we're in and the times that we're going to continue to head into in the very near future. So our final invitation of this series is to invite others in. Think about that for a second. If we are created for community, if we're created to have influence, positive influence over one another, the invitation to then let people into our lives intentionally, to bring them into our lives and to invest in their lives will be the most important invitation that you and I can send out, greater than any other invitation that we send in the mail or otherwise. And that's for two reasons that we've been talking about this whole series. Two reasons. When you invite somebody in, you're telling them that they are important, that they matter to us, because we invite people who are important to us. Like those two invitations that I talked about at the very beginning, those invitations were significant because all of a sudden it said, you matter to me. You know, so I was just on my own and suddenly they invited me. It made me feel important. It made me feel wanted. It made me feel invited. That's what happens when we invite people. And even Jesus, when he was here, he said something like this. He was telling people about his kingdom. Jesus was telling people about his kingdom and what his followers would be like and what they would do, how they would go about their life. And so in talking about his kingdom and how his people would interact with one another, he said it's going to seem backwards to the way of this world. You know, because people whom you should hate, those are going to be the ones that you pray for. People who you should avoid, those are going to be the ones that you associate with. People who you should shun will be those who you invite in. He's talking in Matthew 5. And in that specific verse, he's talking about praying for your enemies. And buried in that verse is one of our scriptures for this morning, starting in 46. He says, "For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same?" Basically what Jesus is saying, it's expected that people will invite or interact, engage with people who are like themselves. What's unexpected and what his kingdom and his followers are going to do is they're going to invite people in who are not like them. That's what he's talking about for all of his kingdom and all of his people. But for us today, it's talking about inviting people in, maybe somebody that we haven't previously invited into our life for any number of reasons. But when we invite somebody in, and what Jesus is talking about, the focus is not on us. But when we invite them in, the focus is on them. Because others matter. And so the second thing is inviting people into our lives is also to invite them to Christ. You know, when you and I invite somebody into our life as followers of Jesus, we are naturally also inviting them and introducing them to Christ. And did you know that Jesus actually gave the world, not us, the world a test? He gave the world a test to tell if whoever they came in contact with were actually one of his followers or not. And so he gave the world a test for you and for me. And this is what he said. He said, "By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." That's the test that Jesus gave to the world. To put it simply, is saying they will know us by our love. So when we invite people in and when we live out our faith and the love that Jesus is calling us to, they will come to know Jesus through us because they will know that we are Jesus's. So when we invite them in and we show them that love and that compassion and that grace, when we show them by the mere fact that we invite them, we're telling them that they are important to us, and therefore they are important to Jesus. They encounter the love of Christ, and then they encounter Christ when we invite them in. That's why I say this is the most important invitation that we could possibly send out, because when we invite them in, we're inviting them to Christ as well. I kind of have a funny image of this, and you'll have to bear with this image because I understand it's slightly flawed, and you'll see in a second. But Jesus called his church, us, each of us as a believer are part of the church of Christ, and so it's all of us together. He calls us, his church, a light in a dark world. And when Jesus says that, the implication is when everything is engulfed in darkness and suddenly a light appears, people run to the light. They naturally move towards the light when their world gets dark. Light attracts people. So here's my mental image for you. It's like a bug zapper. Bugs can't help but fly towards the light, right? And then they're zapped. That's like us. Maybe minus the last part. Take off that last part. That's where that image kind of doesn't work very well. But it's like a bug zapper. We're attracted to the light. People run. When the world gets dark, they look for light wherever they can find it. There's a lot of people and places that try to show them what light is. But they have to be able to see the light to begin with. And that's part of the invitation, that when we invite people into our life, if our light is the light of Christ, they begin to see the true light, which gives light and life to their darkness. When we invite people in, we stand as a light. Kind of like what we do on Christmas Eve when we pass the candle and the lights. That's exactly what we do when we invite people in. So there are two truths that we've been talking about through this whole series on invitations. Invitations are to fun and exciting things, and when we send out an invitation, we send it out to people who are important to us. When we invite people into our lives, it's an invitation into the greatest thing that we could possibly give, ourselves. It's an invitation to the greatest thing that we can give, into our lives, as well as, obviously, that's an invitation to Christ. And so when we invite people in, especially those who aren't expecting it, what it does is it communicates to them. It says, you are important. You matter. You have worth. You have value. Because invitations are sent to special people, and everybody knows that. And so we've been talking about that, all of this, all these last 3 weeks. And so now I want to move into what we do. I want to move into the super specific part. Where do we go as a church? And so I want to present something to you that hasn't came to me over the last 3 weeks. This actually came to me about 4 years ago. And so I want to present to you what came to me about 4 years ago, and you will begin to see how it might apply to us. And so the thought behind this originally was to have a very simple, easy, tangible, and user-friendly way that you and I can begin to reach into people's lives for Christ. And it's simply called the Pick 3 campaign, where you pick 3 specific people and you begin to invest and put intentional efforts into their life for a very specific purpose. And as you'll see, these 3 people are going to come from 3 different groups of people who exist in your life. And what it's meant to start with somebody who's very close with you, who already has that close personal relationship, and then you're going to extend farther and farther out from there. And you're going to pick people from these three groups. So you're picking one from each of the groupings, and you're going to do something with them. I'll tell you what the groupings are here in just a second. You're going to begin to do things with them to establish a relationship or build upon an already existing relationship. For example, you might share dinner with them. You might have them over or go over with them or invite them out to Miss B's or Lucille's or wherever your favorite place is. Take them down to Chicken Annie's or whatever. You know, you get a lot of car time then, right? Or maybe if you're a golfer or a fisher, you invite them to go out and golf and fish with them and start building upon that relationship that's already there. And I'll explain more on that part here in just a second. So I want to give you the three groups that you're going to pick one person from each. Therefore, you will have three people. So the first group is this one. You're going to pick someone in the church that you already have a relationship with. You're going to pick somebody in this church specifically who you already have an established relationship with. However, I'm going to give one caveat. Don't pick somebody that you already do everything with. The best example I have in this process is Laura Reinhardt and Sue Ellen Galladay should probably not pick each other because they're already doing all the things that we're going to talk about. That's a cop-out. We're going to take it the next step back. You're going to go to somebody that you have a relationship within the church, but maybe it doesn't extend beyond the church. That's the first person you're going to pick. You're going to pick one of those people. So, for example, if I were to pick somebody, this is just putting it out there, let's say I pick Paul. Because Paul and I, we have a good church relationship, right? But we haven't really gone out to lunch or anything. Yeah. And so that's what I'm talking about. You know, you pick somebody that you have a good Sunday morning or a Wednesday relationship with, but you haven't done anything else with that relationship outside of normal church function. So pick one of those people that exists here. I'll give you a couple minutes to think on it. And so I'm just going to move on and I'll give you the other two groups. The second group is you're going to pick a person who has been in the church but maybe has grown distant from the church. Maybe not talking about the last 3 months, but prior to that, maybe they became less frequent. Maybe they became disaffected with the church. Maybe you haven't seen them in a while. Basically, you'll be finding someone who you used to see around, but you haven't seen them for a significant amount of time. This is somebody that you think back 6, 8, 12, 14, 16, 24 months, and you think, I used to have a conversation with this person, but I don't remember seeing them. You know, the last time I might have had a conversation with them because the last time I saw them was maybe Christmas or last September. That's the second person you're going to pick, or the second group that you're going to pick somebody from. The third group that you're going to pick somebody from is you're going to pick somebody who shares a part of your life outside of the church. You're going to pick somebody who does not share. Maybe it's somebody at work. Maybe it's somebody at school. Maybe it's a family member that you just don't really get along with, you haven't spent much time with. You're going to pick somebody that you share an aspect of your life with, but one important part is you don't share Jesus or you don't share church. Somebody who is not a follower of Christ, who is not a churchgoer, this church or any other church. So those are the three groups that you're going to pick one person from each group from. And what you're going to simply do is begin to intentionally make efforts, make plans, and do things with these people to continue a relationship that you already have and build upon the foundation of whatever relationship you already have, to grow deeper together. And ultimately what's going to happen, the purpose, the idea behind all of this is as you begin to intentionally make efforts, as you begin to intentionally invite them deeper and deeper into your life, you're going to begin to share things. You're going to begin to come in contact with things, true things of life and true things of faith as you grow closer together. So for example, with your brother or sister in Christ that you already have an existing relationship with, maybe you actually stop and get together and pray with and for one another and your families. You actually call each other up or you go out for coffee or whatever and you say, this is our prayer time where we are praying for one another. Or maybe you start to begin to share things with this person that you might have not otherwise, things that are bothering you, things that have really gotten you down, or even things that you've just gotten super excited about and you want to share it with somebody, and so you start to break into their life by sharing this with them. Or maybe you get on a Bible reading plan or do a Bible study together. You begin to intentionally get into God's Word together. Because it's kind of like the spokes of a wheel. We talk about this with the relationship between a husband and wife. If you put Jesus at the center, you grow closer together as you grow closer to Christ. That's how it works with any relationship. You grow closer together when you grow closer to Christ. So maybe you do that with somebody in the church you already have a good relationship with. What about that second group? The second group where it's somebody who has not been around for a while, or maybe they've become disaffected by the church because of something that happened or whatever. Maybe you start just, hey, I've not seen you in a while. You want to go out for coffee? You want to go out for lunch? Maybe you have, Scott, maybe you take him out fishing. You say, I'm going fishing, every day, and so just pick a day and we're going to go out and I'm just going to take you out fishing. He did that with me. Hopefully I don't fall in that second group with him. But, take him out golfing. Do something that you already do and that you share together, and just start breaking in together. Start building upon that relationship. Maybe when we finally get some good games back on the TV, maybe you invite them over to the game, or you go out to a restaurant and watch the game and share a meal with them there. That's the second person. The third person. This is somebody who shares a part of your life, but what you don't share is the most important part, which is Christ and the church. What do you do for that person? Maybe you're at work and you just begin to start intentionally bringing up conversations that you know if they take a bite of it, it will eventually lead to conversations of deep life and faith and maybe church. Maybe you invite them and your family over to dinner. Or at work, or maybe at the family reunion because you picked a family member that you've grown distant from. Maybe you just start chit-chatting with them. You intentionally have conversations and you're waiting for them to say something that allows you to jump into the conversation. They're worried about life. They're worried about their health. They're worried about the future, whatever's going on in their life. And all of a sudden you say, hold on. Can I stop you there? Can I pray with you right here and right now over this thing? Maybe that's something you start to do for that third group of people. So like I said, this is the Pick 3 campaign that came to me like 4 years ago. It's something that started back then, but I think now, because of the world that we live in today, because of everything that's gone on, I think that takes it to a whole nother level. I think it takes it one step deeper, because right now there are brothers and sisters in Christ who are watching us through that camera, not here with us. You've got brothers and sisters who don't feel like they can come back together with us. So right now, there's somebody in your life that you might already have that close relationship with, that you can begin to reach into their life, because maybe there's nobody else that's reaching out to them. And you're like, if anybody needs a brother right now, if there's anybody that needs a sister right now, it's them, because they can't be here with us. So maybe you intentionally pick one of those people in your life, and you begin to reach out to them and develop that relationship further. Maybe you pick somebody who's a church member or a Christian but hasn't really been around very often, whether it's life, job, family, or whatever, and something's struggling. They're struggling with what's been happening, and maybe they're struggling about the future and what's going to happen because of jobs and schools. Will they reopen? What do they do with their kids? All of these other things. Maybe you just sit there and listen to them. Be somebody that they can talk to and vent and share their fears and their worries, and then give them just a simple encouragement or a word of peace in the time that we find ourselves in. If you haven't caught on, there are two foundational pieces that the Pick 3 campaign is built upon. The first is that each of us, as followers of Christ, are called to go out and make disciples, which means developing authentic and deep relationships with others. Deeper and more authentic relationships with one another as brothers and sisters in Christ. But it's also going out to those who may or may not be followers of Jesus. And by virtue of your words and by virtue of your actions, you begin to invite them towards Christ by the things you say and do. The second foundational piece of this, as we've been talking about the last 3 weeks, is it's about inviting people into your life. A truth about life is we don't develop strong, deep relationships unless we first invite somebody in, unless they invite us in. It's about inviting people in. You can't share your faith with somebody if you haven't first invited them in. For the most part, that's kind of how we share our faith. We have to first earn the right to be heard. That's just the reality of people. Rarely can we stand and point fingers. Rarely can we stand on the street corners and yell out and expect them to come to Christ. Yeah, that does happen on very rare occasion. But what happens is you share the day in, day out, year in, year out relationship building process whereby you earn the right for them to listen to you. You earn the right to begin to have them consider the truth and the validity of your faith because of the sincerity, authenticity, and depth of the love that you've shown them. That's when they're willing to consider and listen to us about our faith. So here's what I want us to do as the end result of all of this. I want you to take a couple of minutes, and whether you have something to write on or you put it in your phone or you log it away in your brain, I want you to take a couple of minutes, and I want you to come up with one person from each of those three groups. Now, before I say go and give you a couple of minutes to do that, I understand some of you might look at those and you might have 2 or 3 people in each of those groups and you can't pick one person right now. So if you have to, write down a list of people and that you could go home and pray over it and say, God, I've got these people in my life. Is there one person out of this group that you're calling me to? So if you can't think of one specifically for any of you, you have a category or a grouping, you can do that. So I want you to take a couple of moments, whether you're here, whether you're online. I want you to take a couple of moments and think through this. Write them down. Put them in your phone. Tell them to your spouse, to your kids, so that when you forget like I do, you can go back, hey, honey, what did I say? And then she'll tell me, because that's just what I do. So spend a couple of minutes and think through, come up with at least 3 people, if not a grouping in those 3 categories, of people that you can begin to do this with. Go. So here's what I want to do for us as a church moving forward. Us as a church or the church, anybody who might watch online now or later. This is what we can do right now as we begin to move forward over the next couple of months. Because we are now, just today, beginning to get back into the swing of things as far as church goes. You know, we're heading into the summer when people's schedules are naturally different than the rest of the year, and of course they're more different this year than they have been any other year. This is the time of the year where if the coronavirus is of any concern to you, this is the time of year when most likely, just like the flu, it's going to be at its least possible to get to you, because everything comes up in the winter. So we're hitting a time of year when we can begin to step out and do a lot of these things in a more safe fashion. We're in a time of year when everybody's life, for the most part, has been completely upended, and it's probably not going to return to normal. And if it does, it's going to be what we're calling the new normal, right? We're heading into a new time. We're in a time right now when we have the greatest opportunity to begin to do the very things that I've just talked about. To begin to do the very things that we probably could have been or should have been doing all along, which is inviting people in and sharing life together. So what I would do is I would encourage us as a church, as people of Christ, to begin to send out these invitations to people, inviting them into our life, inviting them to share life with us, to share life with one another, to share Christ with one another. And as you do, maybe you're sharing time together, you're sharing conversations together, you're looking for opportunities to come alongside these people. You're looking for opportunities to be the light and love, the hands and feet of Christ in their life, to show and share them who Christ is and how he loves, to speak truth into the chaos, to bring light into the darkness, and maybe even invite them when the opportunity arises. Maybe you invite them to Christ. Or maybe it's a brother and sister in Christ and you invite them to a new area of life and ministry because you say, let's just get together and do this. Maybe you invite them to church, whether it's physical or online. You invite them into your life. You invite them deeper and deeper, leading them on to faith and leading them on to that deeper relationship where they can trust you because they know who you are. They know whose you are. And they know where that love is truly coming from, especially in the times that we find ourselves, and certainly the times that we're going to continue to find ourselves. This is the greatest thing we can do, the greatest invitation that you and I could possibly send out. And it all starts with our love. Because as the great song says, they will know us by our love.